Africa's economic future will be determined by how it designs and implements policies that promote industrialization and economic transformation. And Africa's governments must take urgent action. These are the words of Dr. Carlos Lopes. He's the Executive Secretary for the UN Economic Commission for Africa. He now joins us from our Cape Town studios to discuss industrialization for an emerging Africa. I'm holding in my hand a document that you wrote, Dr. Lopes, and it says, Africa can and must industrialize. We have 12% of the world's oil reserves, 40% of its gold, and 80 to 90% of its platinum group metals. Impressive, but we're still extractive-based economies. Why is that the case?
Well, partly is because of the structure of our economies that we inherited from a colonial period and have been unable to transform. Most of the problems that African economies have faced in the last 2 decades were related to imposition of a certain number of policies that didn't give enough space for the implementation of industrial policies. In fact, industries have actually taken off in the 70s, and then there was a complete backtrack from that experience that was quite successful for a while. Mm-hmm. And only a few countries actually are outside the pattern, and the pattern is very negative. We have incredible richness, and this is the moment for us to transform that richness into potential for industrialization. We should call for no less than massive industrial commodity-based policies. And I think it is feasible, it is necessary, and it is the only way we are going to address our demographic curve, our youth bulge, and it is also the only way we are going to be really transformative.
What is interesting is, of course, that the South African government buys wholly into your argument. Industrialization is one of the key pillars of the economic strategy of the Zuma administration. But many mainstream economists would argue that industrialization is just a clever word for protectionism, and that what you need in a global economy is open markets and easy access. Is that the way to go, though?
Well, you still need a certain degree of protectionism if you are going to implement industrial policies. Every single country that has managed to actually rise into a transformative mode and not just being based on what you can extract and what you can do with the primary sector has had to implement protective policies. But in fact, the way you do it, you have to be savvy enough, sophisticated enough to have the right balance. And I think what has been missing in Africa in most of the cases that we have studied is precisely this right balance. Either we go one extreme with very protective policies that really don't create the incentives for the industries actually to be implemented, for investment to be attracted, the regulatory systems become extremely rigid and counterproductive. Or you have exactly the opposite. You have also situations where we had very good industrialization for a while, mm-hmm. but then we reversed the gains because of bad policies as well. Case in point, Zimbabwe used to be the second most industrialized country in the continent, and then look at what happened. You know, we kind of dismantled the entire structure that was in place because of wrong policies again. Mm-hmm. So we need the right policy mix, and that policy mix cannot be just national. It has also to have some ingredients that are continent-wide. And this is why we need a reflection about regional integration beyond the way it has been done so far, which is very politicized, very ideological, and not technical enough.
Well, we've got a big infrastructure rollout program now that's being driven from the AU side, but also in the various blocks on the continent, from SADC, for example. Is that one of the ways in which industrialization can be put on the agenda? But more importantly also, for that backward and forward linkages to be created in economies, you need skills in countries, and that is often the place where many African countries fall down.
Well, look, we are insisting that right now is the moment to be bold. The news are rather good insofar as growth is concerned. The quality of growth is a different matter. The quality of the statistics are also quite a challenge, and we should not believe everything we hear. But in general terms, we have megatrends that are favorable to Africa. Megatrends that relate to demographics, to relate to the demand on commodities and the prices of commodities right now, and also the fact that Africa has been quite resilient in face of financial crisis and recessive period that we are living outside the continent. We have also, of course, the major factor of the new emerging economies being quite interested in Africa for a variety of reasons. What we have as Africans to do is to make sure that all these megatrends that are favorable to us, including the internal ones, such as the increase of our middle class and our consumption patterns, have to be the moment for us to do something deeper, something that really changes the paradigm. And the paradigm right now is that, yes, we are very much dependent on natural resources, richness. You are absolutely right. We have to have a number of other factors in addition to this richness. We have to have skills, but Africa right now is poised to benefit from the same conditions that Asian countries faced in the 70s, where their skills level was comparable to what we can find today in Africa. We have also to benefit from investment incentives, and the regulatory mechanisms that will produce such results are missing in most of Africa, and we need to make sure that we create the right conditions for that to happen. And of course, infrastructure is a major, major element of the equation. But again, here the news are rather positive. The investments on infrastructure in the continent in the last 5 to 10 years have been really incredible, way beyond expectations, and they continue to rise. In fact, the continent-wide impactful projects of infrastructure, 10 of them, that have been put together by the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, have either been already financed or at least the financing engineering has been put together. So the prospects are rather good for Africa to benefit from quite an important boom also in terms of infrastructure. So if you put all these elements together, what is missing is basically more bold policies and a degree of ambition that so far was missing, and we hope to be able to reverse.
Now, Dr. Lopes, you are very firm and in arguing that commodity-based industrialization is possible. Sketch for us how this can be achievable given some of the weaknesses that we have outlined, whether it is lack of proper policy, lack of skills. How does commodity-based industrialization happen within current conditions?
Well, there are other continents that have benefited from conditions similar to what we can find in today's Africa, namely in Latin America. And for quite some time, the balance of the right policy mix was not completely known. We have some examples that we can extract from history, but each case is a case, and it's very important for us to bear that in mind. You cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to taking benefit from commodities and transforming them into potential for industrialization. Value addition is a very complicated business. But when you look into the experiences that existed and you compare with today's situation, you see that there are a certain number of lessons we can learn in Africa, and there are already some examples in Africa where this is happening. Like, for instance, if you look into Morocco, and you see how they invested in skills and created an infrastructure environment that attracted very important industrial projects, including on aeronautics, quite a sophisticated area. You look into what is happening with agriculture in a country like Kenya or Ethiopia, and you see how they are adding value to primary commodities that otherwise would not have been giving as much contribution to the economy. And you look into an example like Nigeria that normally has a very complicated regulatory situation, and then still you have quite incredible progress on oil products and oil-related products. So you have examples, and we have to build on those examples.
Yes. Dr. Carlos Lopes, we have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Thank you so much. That was the Executive Secretary for the UN Economic Commission for Africa, discussing industrialization for Africa's emerging economies.